Daniel had been on alien worlds before, but nothing prepared him for the mining colony of Karvik. The place smelled of metal and heat, the air heavy with dust from the deep tunnels. Huge machines roared day and night, and the workers, towering alien miners, moved like living mountains. They were bigger, faster, and stronger than any human Daniel had ever seen. He stepped out of the transport shuttle with his small bag. His new job was as a security guard, a position most aliens thought was useless here. The miners could handle themselves, or so they claimed. The moment Daniel walked into the main hall, he could feel eyes on him. At the center of the crowd stood Captain Vera. Her skin was dark bronze, her muscles carved like stone, and her height easily dwarfed his. She wore heavy armor that looked like it weighed more than Daniel himself. Her golden eyes scanned him slowly, and then she smirked. "So this is the human they sent," she said loudly so everyone could hear. "Looks fragile enough to break if the wind blows too hard." A few miners chuckled. Daniel didn't answer. He had learned long ago that sometimes silence was stronger than words. Vera walked closer, tilting her head as if studying a strange animal. "You have no claws, no fangs, no armor," she continued. "What can you possibly do here? Watch us work." Daniel met her gaze, calm and steady. "I'll do my job," he said simply. Her smirk widened. "We'll see how long you last, little human," she replied. Then she turned away, her heavy boots thudding on the metal floor. The other miners followed her, still laughing under their breath. For the next few days, Daniel kept to his duties. He patrolled the tunnels, checked equipment logs, and made sure safety rules were followed. The miners barely spoke to him unless it was to mock his speed or size. Vera was always the loudest, calling him soft skin or paper bones. He never reacted, and that seemed to frustrate her more than if he had argued. One night, as Daniel was finishing his shift, the ground shuddered under his feet. A low rumble echoed through the tunnels. The walls vibrated, and dust rained down. From the ceiling, his comm device crackled with urgent voices. "Tunnel for collapse. Workers trapped." Daniel grabbed his helmet and ran toward Tunnel 4. He could already hear the distant groan of metal supports giving way. The air grew hotter, and the smell of smoke mixed with the dust inside the tunnel. Lights flickered. Shadows jumped along the jagged walls. A loud crash echoed ahead, and Daniel broke into a sprint. His heart pounded. He turned a corner and froze. Vera was pinned under a massive steel support beam. Her face was twisted with pain. She tried to push the beam off, but even her powerful arms shook with the effort. "Go," she shouted when she saw him. The tunnel's coming down. Daniel didn't move toward the exit. Instead, he ran to her. He dropped to one knee and slid his hands under the beam. The weight nearly crushed him instantly, his muscles screaming, "Stop! You can't lift that." Vera barked, "I can try." Daniel grunted. Slowly, inch by inch, he pushed upward. The beam rose just enough for Vera to pull one leg free. Another loud crack echoed through the tunnel. Dust rained down in thick clouds. "Leave me," she shouted again, but this time her voice didn't sound so sure. Daniel's jaw tightened. His arms burned. His back felt like it would snap, but he didn't let go. "Not happening," he said. His voice was low, steady. Vera's eyes widened. For a moment, the sounds of the collapsing tunnel faded, and all she could hear was the human's heavy breathing as he refused to abandon her. With one final heave, Daniel shoved the beam high enough for her to roll clear. He grabbed her arm and yanked her to her feet. The tunnel behind them groaned like a dying beast. "Run," Daniel said, pulling her forward. She stumbled at first, still shocked he had lifted that weight. Then she matched his pace, their boots slamming against the ground as rocks crashed down inches behind them. They burst out into the main hall just as the tunnel entrance collapsed completely. A huge cloud of dust exploded outward, covering them both. Vera bent over, breathing hard. Her golden eyes locked on Daniel. The mocking smile she wore earlier was gone. "You held that." "For me," she said between breaths. Daniel just shrugged. "Couldn't let you get buried for the first time since he arrived." Vera had no clever insult. She only stood there, her chest rising and falling, as if she was seeing him for the very first time. The tunnel collapse had left the colony on edge. Miners whispered about what happened. Some didn't believe it at first. A human holding a beam long enough to save Captain Vera. Impossible. Yet the ones who saw the dust-covered pair stumble out of the tunnel swore it was true. Daniel went back to his usual duties the next day. He didn't want attention. He preferred quiet work. But everywhere he went, he could feel eyes on him. The same miners who had ignored or mocked him were now watching in silence. Vera, however, didn't say a word to him all morning. She passed him in the mess hall without a comment. She joined the briefing without a single glance in his direction. Daniel thought maybe she was embarrassed. He didn't mind. He hadn't saved her for thanks. By evening, the colony received another alarm. This time, it wasn't a collapse, but a secondary shockwave from the unstable rock layers. The tremor shook the south tunnels, and a group of workers didn't make it out. Daniel grabbed his helmet and sprinted with the other rescue teams. Vera was already ahead, barking orders. The air in the south tunnels was thick with heat and dust. Their boots splashed in shallow water where broken pipes leaked into the corridor. They reached the damaged section. Metal supports bent and unnatural. Shapes sparks fell from broken cables. Daniel saw movement to miners trapped behind a twisted doorframe. Vera rushed forward. But the floor gave way beneath her in an instant. She was sliding down a sloping shaft toward darkness. Her claws scraped the metal. But they couldn't find a hold. Daniel didn't think. He threw himself forward, his hand shooting out. His fingers closed around her wrist. The force nearly yanked him down too. His boots skidded on the wet metal. "Got you?" he shouted. Vera's other hand grabbed his forearm. Her golden eyes widened. The slope beneath her feet broke apart and fell away. Now there was nothing but a deep drop under her. The roar of rushing water echoed below. "Let go," she barked. "You'll fall too." "Not happening." Daniel gritted his teeth, his muscles strained, the wet surface giving him no grip. He leaned back, trying to anchor himself against the jagged wall. The sound of cracking metal filled the air. Vera's voice changed. It was no longer commanding, no longer mocking. It was sharp with fear. "Don't let go," she shouted. Daniel's arms shook. His boots slipped another inch. He felt the pull of her weight trying to drag him down. His breath came in hard bursts, sweat mixed with the dust on his face. With one desperate lunge backward, he pulled her up enough for her claws to hook the edge. She kicked against the wall, and together they scrambled onto solid ground. Both of them collapsed, coughing and covered in grime. For a moment, they just lay there, catching their breath. The tunnel was silent except for the distant drip of water. Then Vera sat up, her eyes locked on him. Her voice was quieter now. "You should have let me fall." Daniel shook his head. "Not my style." Something flickered across her face. Confusion, maybe something else. She opened her mouth as if to say more, but a call from the trapped miners pulled her back to her feet. They worked together to free the doorframe, and soon the workers were safe when they returned to the main hall. Vera stayed close to him. She didn't mock him. She didn't challenge him. Instead, she walked in silence. Her gaze kept drifting to his hands, the same hands that had refused to release her, even when it could have meant his own death. That night, Daniel sat alone in the mess hall, eating a simple meal. He felt a shadow fall over the table. Looking up, he saw Vera. She was holding a mug of steaming drink. Without asking, she sat across from him. "You didn't let go," she said finally. as if the words had been stuck in her throat all day. "I told you," Daniel replied. "Not my style." For a long moment, they just sat there. The mess hall was quiet, except for the low hum of machinery. Then she gave a small nod. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't thanks, but it was something. Something that told Daniel the way she looked at him had changed. From that day on, whenever they worked together, Vera stayed close. Her voice still carried strength. But the edge of mockery was gone, and sometimes, just sometimes, when the tunnels grew quiet and the shadows deep, Daniel could feel her watching. Him, not like before, but like someone who had learned the value of a grip that never lets go. The colony's rescue alarms had barely been silenced when another disaster struck. This time, it wasn't a tremor or a small collapse. It was the kind of cave-in that made even the toughest miners pale. Daniel was on patrol in the western tunnels when the first roar came. It sounded like the world was tearing apart. The ground bucked under his feet, and dust burst from the ceiling in thick clouds. His cum crackled with a single, desperate shout. Section 12's going down. Section 12 was deep, far from the main exit. The moment Daniel heard it, he knew there were people inside. He ran, boots pounding against metal grates. The deeper he went, the darker and hotter the air became. Lights overhead flickered and went out one by one. As he rounded a bend, he nearly slammed into Vera. She was hauling a miner by the arm. Her armor was covered in dust, her golden eyes wild. "Collapse," she barked. "3 more are still inside." Daniel didn't hesitate. "Where?" She pointed toward a narrow tunnel ahead. Even as she spoke, a deep groan echoed from within. The sound of rock grinding against rock made the hairs on Daniel's neck stand. Without a word, they ran into the tunnel together. The passage was already half blocked by fallen debris. They had to crawl over jagged slabs. The air was choking. Every breath felt heavier. They found the trapped miners near the end. One was unconscious, pinned under a shattered support beam. The other 2 were trying desperately to dig him out. Daniel dropped to his knees and shoved the smaller debris aside. Vera braced her hands against the beam. "Lift with me," she shouted. They heaved together, but the beam didn't budge. Another rumble shook the ground. The piece of the ceiling slammed down inches away. The trapped miner groaned weakly. Then came the sound that made Daniel's blood run cold. A sharp crack from above. The tunnel's main support was snapping. "Get them out now," Daniel yelled. Vera grabbed the 2 standing miners and shoved them toward the exit. Daniel stayed with the unconscious one. He wedged his shoulder under the beam and pushed upward. Pain shot through his back. His arms trembled violently. The ceiling split with a deafening roar. Chunks of rock and steel rained down. Daniel hauled the miner onto his shoulder and staggered forward. He could see daylight from the exit ahead, and Vera standing there, her eyes wide. "Run!" she shouted. Daniel sprinted, the ground falling apart behind him. A final beam came crashing down toward them. In one desperate move, he shoved the miner toward Vera and threw himself forward. His hands hit the edge of the stable ground, but his legs dangled over the void. Vera didn't hesitate. She dropped to her knees and grabbed his wrists. Her claws dug into his skin. "I've got you," she yelled over the roar of the collapse. The world around them was chaos, rock smashing into rock, dust swallowing the air. The pull on his arms was brutal. She was strong, but the shifting debris tried to drag him back down. Her face twisted. With effort, "Don't let go," she yelled. The same words she had once spoken in fear now came out as a command. Daniel's boots scraped against the wall until he found a grip. Together they pulled, inch by inch, until he rolled onto solid ground. The tunnel behind them gave one final shudder before sealing shut completely. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They were both coated in dust, coughing, Their eyes burned from the smoke. The trapped miners were safe. But the weight of what just happened hung heavy in the air. Vera looked at him, really looked. And for the first time her voice was soft. "You're insane," she said. "But you don't let go." Daniel managed a tired smile. "Not my style." She stared at him for a heartbeat longer, then turned to help the others. But as they walked back to the main hall, she stayed close, her shoulder brushing his more than once, as if to make sure he was still there, still real. That night, while the miners repaired the damage, rumors spread again. This time, they weren't just about the human strength. They were about the way Captain Vera had pulled him out like her own life depended on it, and somewhere deep in the tunnels of Karvik. The story of a human who never let go was becoming something more, something even the toughest alien warriors couldn't mock. The collapse in Section 12 had left the colony buzzing with talk. By the next morning, Daniel's name was on every lip. Some miners told the story like it was a legend already. Others swore they saw him running out of the tunnel with the unconscious worker on his shoulder. Many couldn't believe that Captain Vera herself had been the one to drag him to safety. Daniel didn't care much for the attention. He woke early, ate his breakfast in silence, and went back to his rounds. His body ached from the strain of the day before, his arms felt heavy, and his back still throbbed. But he walked the same way he always did, calm and steady. Vera, however, was different. She wasn't mocking him anymore. No smirks, no nicknames, no sarcastic comments. In fact, she barely spoke to anyone that morning. She moved through the colony with a quiet expression, her golden eyes scanning the corridors like she was looking for something. Daniel found out what that something was when he stepped into the equipment storage. She was there, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, waiting. "You're late," she said, though her tone was softer than before. "Didn't know I had an appointment," Daniel replied. She pushed off the wall and walked toward him. Her boots echoed on the metal floor. She stopped. Just a foot away, close enough that he could see the faint scar above her left eyebrow. "Why do you do it?" she asked. "Why risk your life like that? Twice now, you've been a step away from dying." Daniel shrugged. "Because someone had to." "That's not an answer," she pressed. Her voice wasn't angry. It was searching, as if she was trying to understand something completely alien to her. "It's the only one I have," Daniel said. "You're my teammate, and when a teammate's in trouble, you don't walk away." Her eyes lingered on his face for a long moment. Then, she nodded slowly, as if filing away the words in some private place, without another word. She turned and left the storage room the rest of the day. Vera stayed closer to him than usual. On patrol, she matched his pace. In the mess hall, she sat at the next table. When they crossed paths in the narrow tunnels, she didn't just pass by. She looked him in the eye and gave a small nod. It didn't go unnoticed by the other miners. Whispers followed them. Some were amused, others confused. A few even seemed uncomfortable, as if the unshakable Captain Vera showing respect to a human was somehow wrong in their world. That night, Daniel was called to the medical bay to check on the workers rescued from Section 12. They were recovering well, but one of them, an older miner named Garen, insisted on talking to him. "You've got her respect now," Garen said, his voice raspy from the dust. "That's no small thing. Human. Vera doesn't give it easy." Daniel just smiled faintly. "I didn't do it for respect." "Doesn't matter," Garen said. "What matters is she fight for you now." On his way back from the medical bay, Daniel spotted Vera in the observation deck. She was staring out at the rocky horizon, the faint glow of distant mining lights casting shadows across her armor. He stepped beside her. They stood in silence for a while. The stars above Karvik seemed almost too bright against the black sky. "You ever think about leaving this place?" Daniel asked. She glanced at him. "Why would I? This is my world. I guess I just mean..." "There's more out there," he said. Her lips curved into the smallest of smiles. Maybe. But some things worth keeping aren't out there. They're right here. Daniel looked at her, trying to read the meaning behind the words, but before he could ask, an alarm blared through the colony. The red emergency lights began to flash, and the cum crackled with urgent voices. Storm incoming. All personnel to shelter. The loudspeaker repeated the message. Vera turned to him, the old fire back in her eyes. Looks like our shift isn't over yet. Daniel grabbed his helmet, then let's go. They moved out together, side by side, and for the first time since he arrived. It felt less like two people doing their own jobs and more like a team that trusted each other completely. The warning sirens echoed through every corridor. The storm approaching Karvik wasn't just wind and dust. It was an ion storm, a deadly mix of charged particles that could fry systems, collapse tunnels, and kill anyone caught outside. Daniel followed Vera toward the rescue staging point. The colony's outer sensors had already detected that several miners were trapped in the western sector. Too far to reach the main shelter in time, the storm's speed meant they had minutes, maybe less. The rescue team scrambled into gear. The airlock hissed open, and the two stepped out into the barren, rocky expanse. The horizon was already dark with a swirling wall of electric clouds. Forks of blue-white lightning danced within the storm like angry spirits. Move fast, Vera ordered, her voice sharp. Over the cum, she took the lead, leaping over jagged boulders. Daniel followed close behind, his breathing steady despite the biting wind that cut across his visor. They reached the western sector's entrance, a small service tunnel halfway buried in debris. The trapped miners' voices crackled faintly over the cum. Muffled and panicked, Daniel and Vera forced their way inside. The narrow space reeked of hot metal and damp stone. Sparks hissed from broken wiring overhead. "We're here," Daniel shouted. His voice echoed back in the darkness. 3 miners were huddled at the far end. One was limping badly. Another had a gash across his forehead. The third clutched a heavy tool bag, refusing to abandon it. No time to argue. Vera barked. She pushed the injured one toward Daniel. "Get him out." They started back toward the surface. But halfway up the tunnel, a sharp tremor shook the ground. The structure groaned dangerously. Daniel shoved the injured miner forward just as part of the ceiling collapsed. Blocking their exit, the only other way out was a maintenance shaft that opened onto a suspended bridge outside. The problem, the bridge was hanging over a deep canyon, and the storm had already reached it. Lightning flashed violently as they emerged. The bridge swayed under their weight. The wind screamed like a living thing. Daniel kept the injured miner steady, while Vera led the others. Halfway across, the bridge jolted hard. One of the cables snapped with a sound like a whip. The structure tilted, throwing Vera off balance. She slipped toward the edge, her claws scraping the metal without thinking. Daniel lunged his hand. Clamped around her wrist, the storm howled around them. Rain and dust stinging his faceplate. She dangled over the drop, the canyon yawning beneath her. Her golden eyes locked onto his. The memory of the tunnels flashed between them. Her voice came raw and urgent through the cum. "Don't let go." "Not happening," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the chaos. He dug his boots into the slick bridge and pulled. The strain tore at his muscles, but inch by inch. He hauled her back onto the walkway. She rolled onto her knees, breathing hard. The storm raged around them, lightning striking so close the air burned. "You're insane," she said, but there was no anger in her voice. Only something that sounded like disbelief mixed with something deeper. "Keep moving," Daniel replied. They pushed forward, the bridge groaning under their weight. When they finally reached the far side, they slammed the hatch shut, just as the storm's full force hit. The metal walls shook violently, but they were safe. The miners slumped against the wall, exhausted and pale. Vera stood in the dim light, eyes fixed on Daniel. She didn't say thank you, but she didn't need to. He could see it in the way her gaze lingered, the way her breathing slowed only. After she was sure he was standing there when they returned to the colony, the storm still roared outside. The rescued miners were sent to medical, and the rescue teams disbanded for the night. Daniel was about to leave when Vera stepped into his path. "You've done it again," she said quietly. "And I still don't understand why." Daniel shrugged. "Told you before, not my style to let go." She stared at him for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "Then, I hope you never change," for the first time since they met. She gave him a small, genuine smile before walking away. Daniel stood there for a while, the sound of the storm muffled by the walls, wondering why that smile felt heavier than any beam he'd ever lifted. The storm lasted through the night, shaking the walls of the colony until the early hours. By morning, the air was clear, but the ground outside was littered with debris and blackened marks from lightning strikes. Daniel woke, stiff and sore, his muscles aching from the rescue. He pushed through the fatigue and went to the briefing room. Most of the miners were already there, talking in low voices. When Daniel entered, they fell silent for a moment before resuming. A few nodded to him in quiet respect. Vera was at the front, reviewing damage reports with the supervisors. She didn't look up when he came in, but Daniel could feel her attention shift toward him anyway. When the meeting ended, she called out, "Daniel, walk with me." They stepped out into the main corridor. The sound of distant repair crews echoed through the halls. Vera led him toward the observation deck. The wide window showed the endless rocky wasteland, still glowing faintly under the pale light of Karvik's sun. For a while, she said nothing. She stood with her arms crossed, eyes fixed on the horizon. Daniel waited, knowing she would speak when she was ready. Finally, she turned to face him. "Do you know what I thought when I first saw you?" she asked. Daniel gave a small smile that I'd break if the wind blew too hard. A faint smirk crossed her lips. "Exactly. I saw a soft skin with no claws, no armor, and I thought, he'll never survive here." Her gaze grew sharper. "But I was wrong." Daniel tilted his head. "What changed your mind?" Her voice lowered. "The first time you lifted that beam for me, I thought it was a fluke. Then you pulled me from the shaft. Then the collapse. And then the storm." She took a slow breath. "No one has ever risked themselves for me like that, not without expecting something in return." Daniel's expression stayed calm. "Did you want me to expect something?" She shook her head. "No, that's what I can't understand. You had no reason, yet every time you didn't let go." Her golden eyes locked onto his. "Do you have any idea what that means to me?" He met her gaze without flinching. "Maybe it means you've been surrounded by the wrong kind of people." Something flickered in her eyes, surprise. Then something softer. She stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking until he could see the faint dust still clinging to her armor. "I mocked your strength," she said quietly, "because I didn't understand it. I thought strength was muscle and speed, but yours is something I can't match." Daniel shrugged slightly. "Strength is just doing what has to be done." She let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "If that's true, then you're the strongest person I've ever met." Her voice softened. "And I respect you more than anyone here." For a moment, neither of them moved. The sounds of the colony faded into the background. Only the faint hum of the observation deck systems filled the silence. Then, Vera said something he didn't expect. "If I was in danger again, if I was falling, if the whole world was coming down on us, would you still hold on?" Daniel's answer came without hesitation. Always, her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then maybe I'll stop hoping for peace and start hoping you're close enough when trouble finds me. The moment was broken by the cum unit on her wrist. Crackling with a call from the control room, she straightened. The captain's tone returning to her voice. Duty calls. They walked back through the corridors side by side, not speaking much, but the air between them had changed. It wasn't just respect now, it was trust, and something deeper that neither of them named. That night, Daniel lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling. Replaying her words in his mind, she respected him more than anyone here. She had said it out loud. And while he wasn't sure what it meant for the future, he knew one thing: whatever came next, he wouldn't let go. Weeks passed after the storm. The repairs to the colony were almost finished, and life began to settle into its usual rhythm. But for Daniel and Vera, something had changed. It was in the way they moved during patrols, in the way they didn't need to speak to know what the other was thinking. They had become a team, not just in name, but in every action. If Daniel checked the rear of a tunnel, Vera covered the front. If she gave a short signal, he knew exactly what it meant without asking. The other miners noticed, and the whispers about the human and the captain grew louder. Some teased, some admired, but no one dared challenge them anymore. One evening, call came from the deep north tunnels. A supply transport had broken down in a dangerous section, and nightfall on Karvik brought freezing winds and predators from the surface. Without waiting for orders, Daniel and Vera volunteered to handle it. They set out quickly, their breath visible in the dropping temperature. The north tunnels were narrow and unstable. The sound of their boots echoed in the stillness. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, the faint clatter of shifting rock warned that the ground wasn't entirely steady. They found the transport wedged between two collapsed supports. The driver, a young miner, was trapped inside. His voice shook as he explained he'd tried to move debris when the structure shifted. Pinning the vehicle, Daniel and Vera worked side by side, shifting heavy pieces of metal and stone. It was slow, dangerous work. Every so often, the ground would groan beneath them, reminding them the whole section could come down at any moment. Then, without warning, the tunnel gave a violent shudder. A massive chunk of the ceiling broke free. Vera shoved Daniel aside as it crashed down where he had been standing seconds earlier. The impact sent a shockwave through the ground. The transport shifted dangerously toward the edge of a narrow drop. Daniel leapt to the driver's side and pulled the miner free, handing him off to Vera. But as the driver scrambled to safety, the remaining debris slid, taking Daniel with it. His boots skidded on loose gravel, and he slid toward the drop. Vera's hand shot out, fingers locking around his wrist. The same scene they had lived through before, but this time, her grip was fierce, her jaw set, her golden eyes burned with determination. "Don't you dare let go," she shouted over the echoing rumble of the collapsing tunnel. Daniel almost laughed, despite the danger. "Not my style," he said. She pulled with everything she had, muscles straining under the weight. Inch by inch, she dragged him back onto solid ground. The debris fell into the darkness below with a final crash, leaving the tunnel eerily quiet. They stood there, breathing hard, dust swirling around them in the dim light. Vera didn't release his arm immediately, even after he was safe. When she finally did, her fingers lingered for a moment longer than necessary. "Now we're even," she said, her voice quieter but steady. Daniel shook his head. "Not even close." They got the driver out, and together they led him back toward the colony. The journey was silent, but not uncomfortable. The bond between them was no longer a question. It was a fact. When they returned, the other miners gathered to hear what happened. But this time, there was no mocking, no disbelief. Instead, there was a shared understanding. The human and the captain had saved each other more than once, and everyone knew it. Later, as the colony quieted for the night, Daniel sat in the mess hall, sipping a hot drink. Vera appeared at his table without a word. She sat across from him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she said, "I used to think strength was something you proved once, in a fight or a challenge. But I've learned it's something you prove again and again. Every time you choose to hold on." Daniel met her gaze. "Then, I guess we're both strong." She gave him that small, rare smile, the one he'd come to recognize as genuine. "Maybe, but I've never met anyone who makes me believe it more than you do." They sat there for a long time, talking quietly while the rest of the colony slept. The storms, the collapses, the near-deaths, all of it had built something between them that no words could fully explain. And Daniel knew, deep down, that whatever happened next, they would face it the same way they had faced everything else, side by side, with a grip that would never let go.